Hey everybody, Larry Fort Worth Memories on YouTube. We're starting our, I don't know why that deal is up there. This morning I'm starting to talk about a series that I'm doing, Gangsters in Cowtown. So I hope that everybody will sign in. All of my lives are done by our sponsors. So I'm going to read off our list of sponsors and then we'll start the show. Casey Crawl is our Medicare expert. Winstead Paint and Body, Techstar Pools, Swartz and Hanson Architects, Rex's Bar and Grill, Rains Plumbing. These folks do all of our sponsors do great work. Railhead Barbecue, Qualified Tree Care. Let me move on to Passport Getaways. There's Qualified Tree Care. There's Passport Getaways. The Optimist Club of Fort Worth. Onassis Masonry. Old South Pancake House on University Drive, open 24/7. K Ranch Roofing. You need insurance? Call Jenny Stewart with State Farm. David Hart, Hart Painting. Fort Worth Lumber. Cross Electric. Fort Worth High Tech Signs. Express Dent, if you got door dings, hail damage, whatever. Express Dent, White Settlement Road in Carroll. Dickey Carr Sand and Gravel, that's Pat and Richard Carr. Steve Coburn, Coburn's Catering. Bert Ladner Realtors, Wes Williams is associated with them. A Bird AC and Heating. Okay, so let me get it back to, I'm still new at this. We're going to get back to Gangsters in Cowtown. Okay, so today is the pilot part of Gangsters in Cowtown. Back when Fort Worth was first founded in 1849, we had the criminal element. We had a section of the downtown area that was a criminal element. It was called Hell's Half Acre. So I'm just going to give you a broad overview of criminal activity, some of our bad boys in town. So in the 1800s, it was Hell's Half Acre, and that was located downtown, basically where the convention center is now. I don't know if that line is showing through on y'all's side, but if it is, I apologize, and I'll get it fixed before we do the next one. So we had Hell's Half Acre, and that's where 24/7 gambling and prostitution, Pharaoh, shell games. They basically stripped the folks that rode on the cattle herds coming through out of all their money. When they left town, they didn't have a penny. These people were very good at what they were doing. Trying to get away from that line, figure out how to do that, I'd be a genius. So then, when Camp Bowie was built, military installation, in 1917, that basically ended the Hell's Half Acre area, because there was a federal law you couldn't have a military installation. There couldn't be houses of ill repute, speakeasies, or not speakeasies, but bars and such as that. So then in the 30s, that gangster element started rearing its ugly head again. Of course, this is during the Depression time, so people didn't have any money. Fort Worth was not affected as much by the Depression as, say, Chicago, Detroit, New York. So in 33, on February 21st of 33, a guy named Olin DeWitt Stevens, he had been in the penitentiary, Leavenworth, several penitentiaries, drugs, he sold heroin. He had a house up on the hill in Hanley on Morrison Lane. It's called the House on the Hill. I was in that house. That house is still there. I think it's a daycare center now. I was in that house back in the 60s, and it had trap doors. They're all still there. False walls. There was a hidden compartment underneath the staircase. But he also, on Lancaster, it was a drugstore. It was a drugstore. Heroin. It was just a front for his illegal businesses. Well, on February 21st of 1933, he orchestrated a train robbery of the Texas Pacific train, and they stole basically $70,000 and some negotiable bonds. That's in 33. That's a lot of money. Over $1 million today. It was the third attempt. These guys were not very good gangsters. The first attempt to rob this train, there was 3 guys. They got into an argument on who was going to drive the getaway car, and the train came, unloaded, and drove off. So attempt number 1 didn't work. Stevens got highly upset, so he designated one of the bad guys to be the getaway driver. Well, on attempt number 2, the getaway driver got drunk at a bar on Lancaster, wrecked the car, so no attempt, didn't work on attempt number 2. Finally, on February 21st, 1933, they pulled it off. Nobody was killed at the robbery. So Stevens tells his cohorts he had a house over on Avenue G, and they met over there. Stevens got the money and the bonds, and he said, all right, we got to lay low. 2 of these guys were one of the guys was from Dallas, and 2 of them were from Eula, close to Abilene. He said, y'all just lay low. This money, they've got the serial numbers, so I'm going to go to Chicago and change our money for good money. That money was earmarked for the Fort Worth National Bank. That's how the feds moved money back then, was by train on mail cars. Those postal employees that worked the mail cars they carried a .32 revolver, which would kill you, but it wasn't very damaging. So Stevens takes off and goes to Chicago, and he thinks he's a brilliant con man. He goes up there and they strip him there's some reports they washed his money for 25%. I think it was 35%. So on the way back to Texas, to Fort Worth, he figures out he needed his money to finish his house on the hill and his building on Lancaster. He says, hell, after I wash this money, I don't have enough money to split with the guys. So he concocted a story or a plan. His cohort was W.D. May. So they just waited out the 3 guys that actually carried out the robbery. Finally, those guys came over it was during the day. They came to the drugstore. They went to his house first on the hill, and nobody was there. So they went to the drugstore, and Stevens says, hey guys, y'all can't be hanging around here. Go back to the house. I'll be there when I close up. So about 6 or 7 that evening, he goes back on Morrison Lane, and the 3 bank robbers are there. They don't know that they're fixing to get whacked, which is what happens. May and Stevens kill them. They stripped their bodies of most of the clothes and tied them in barbed wire. They hog-tied them. They dumped them in the Trinity, and they thought, well, the bodies will never submerge, never come to the top, but they did. And in fact, they never really sunk. This whole episode was a comedy of errors. So finally, the wife of one of the Dallas guys, she was told, well, we're going to go over and split our money, and we'll be back tomorrow at the latest. Well, 2 or 3 days later, they figure out something's happened, so they go to the police. They rat on the robbery, tell the police, hey, our husbands robbed the TMP train station, and it was all orchestrated by O.D. Stevens. So the cops start investigating. They put Stevens and May in jail. He actually finds out when Stevens is in the Tarrant County Jail, which at the time was one of the most secure county jails or city jails in the state. Stevens finds out that Clyde Barrow's sister is visiting a prisoner up there, and Stevens knew the story about Bonnie and Clyde getting people, orchestrating escapes from East Ham Prison and other jails, robbing armories for those BAR machine guns. So he gets with Clyde Barrow's sister, who I interviewed her before she died, and he said, tell your brother if he'll bust us out. There was 3 of them. He said, I'll pay him $6,000 apiece. This is in 33, so that's $18,000. Clyde had, I don't think he really had that much money. I guess he was going to try to con Clyde out. But the plan was Clyde was going to be dressed as a police officer, and Pretty Boy Floyd, he was going to handcuff him and go knock on the jail door about midnight and say, hey, I've got a Pretty Boy Floyd here, and I want to keep him in your jail tonight, and I'll come back in the morning and get him and carry him on to the prison. Well, Pretty Boy Floyd didn't go for it. He said, I'm not about to go in there handcuffed. So before they could actually make the attempt, Bonnie and Clyde were killed in Louisiana. So they convicted May and they convicted Stevens of the murders and of the robbery. May got electrocuted down in Huntsville. Stevens was given a long prison term. He appealed the murder charges, and they figured he'd served his time for the train robbery, and he got out of prison. He had actually been in Alcatraz, got out of prison, came back, didn't even stop in Fort Worth, went on to Arkansas and lived with his son until he got in the upper 60s. And so, but that was the end of his crime time. But anyway, we're going to, over these next few weeks, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8 o'clock in the morning, only on YouTube, we're going to talk about Tyson Eggleston, Elmer Sharp, all of the local guys that were into different stuff. And there was a lot of them here. But one thing I want to say about our gangsters back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and even in the 60s, it wasn't just mass killing. Al Capone killed many people in Chicago that just got in the way of the turf wars, or the speakeasy wars, the illegal booze. Our guys here, I can't think, besides Nelson Harris and his wife Juanita and their unborn child. She was 8 months, 3 weeks pregnant. The day before Thanksgiving, 1950, Nelson went to turn on his Buick, put the key in, started it, nitroglycerin blew him up. So that child and his wife Besides that, they just killed each other, and there was never any of them charged. All the killings, Cecil Green got killed on the highway. Tonsey Eggleston got killed at the Buddies on North Main, and they dumped his body over on in a well in Saginaw. But all of those guys, Lon Hawley, they all got killed by each other, and nobody was ever charged with it. So this is just kind of an overview of what we're going to be talking about. I'll be back at noon and give y'all a little different version. But every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8 a.m., I'm going to come on and do a gangster show. So I appreciate y'all being on, and tell your friends and neighbors. And I always list our sponsors and what's going on with our group. Have a great weekend.